is it that inspires you to create beautiful things? For some of us, it is thoughts of a special person, place, or event that draws us into our sewing rooms. No matter what inspires us, I think beautiful sewing has to come from a heart full of love. And that means that the end result cannot help but be so beautiful. Today we have gathered techniques and ideas to inspire you, and I guarantee that they will be easy as well. I invite you to spend this time with us thinking and learning about beautiful things. Hopefully your heart will be overflowing with ideas before we are through. Welcome to my sewing room. This is such a beautiful and such an easy technique. You know, we love doing beautiful, easy things. First of all, we're going to make a bias strip, and then these wonderful bias tape makers, just run it through, press it. Now, here is a trick on getting ready to apply it easily. We're going to use a fusible web, which after you press it down, when you get ready to put it, you pull this off, and you have a sticky part where you can just stick this bias tape down to your design, to your fabric. Okay, I'm going to trace off the different lines, whatever I want to use for my design. This is the absolute easiest thing in the world to do. Go ahead and transfer your lines onto your silk dupioni. Then pin. You can pull off the tape to make it gluey, but you lay it down and you pin. And then you're going to come in and be sure you have your whole design exactly the way you want it to embellish the top of whatever you're going to make. And then it is time to come in and with just the simplest stitch in the world, a zigzag to attach it. I'm so glad to have as my guest today my friend Chris Tryon. Chris is with Baby Lock USA. Chris, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Martha. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's show this wonderful footstool. This is so creative. I just love all of your home decorating.
Thank you.
Tell us about this, Chris.
On this piece, we used a real simple bias technique, and let's run through how I did that first. And that's the top design that sits on the top of the fabric.
On the stool. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes.
This is just an old footstool.
It's an old footstool I found in a junk shop. $6.
Oh, love it.
The first thing that you're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut our bias strips. And the width that you cut the bias strip is dependent upon the bias tape maker that you use. Then you're going to join your bias strips together so that you have yardage rather than an individual strip. The next technique is to use these great bias tape makers that actually have a groove for the fusible webbing. So when you're done, you end up with a piece that has a fusible webbing on the back side. Okay, so that's all done. We're ready for the next step.
How exciting.
The next step actually is the inspiration. Where do you get the inspiration from? And I'm a big magazine fan, so I go to the bookstore and buy magazines, and this I happened to find some great patterns that gave me great inspiration. So my next step was to go and actually draw that out on a piece of paper so I had a design to follow. Okay, then I chose my fabric, and then I decided to transfer my design onto my fabric using a great gridded ruler and a marking tool. And there are so many of them out there. And the one that I used this time was one that actually when I press it with steam, the markings disappear. Okay, so everything's marked and we're ready to start applying the bias. So what you're going to do is on the back of the strip, you're actually going to remove that paper backing. It's just like the fusible web that you buy yardage wise, only these are tiny strips. So you're going to remove that fusible webbing, and what you're going to do is you're going to pin it down. As you can see on this piece, I've got it pinned. And if you notice how I've got my pins, they're all going in the same direction, because when I press, I start on one corner and I press removing my pins before I press my pins in. Okay, so everything's pressed down and I'm ready to go ahead and sew this in place. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have chosen an easy, simple zigzag stitch. Choose the widest width. On most machines, that's about 7.5 or higher if you have that option on your machine. and a long length, excuse me, about 2.5 to 3.0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my bias strip in between my presser foot, okay? And I'm just going to go ahead and lower my presser foot, and I'm just going to sew across and remove my pin, and then I'm just going to continue to sew.
A simple zigzag.
Just a simple zigzag. Sometimes I think we tend to forget what we have available on our machine as far as stitches, and how a simple zigzag can be a great stitch to add a little bit of interest to something that's already there. Okay. And then this is our final piece, all stitched down.
Okay.
And then we can use it in our project. Okay. Now, the bias. How do you create perfect bias?
A simple bias.
This was a trick that was taught to me by as I call it, a master quilter. She happened, as my mother. She happened to watch me one day struggle cutting bias. I was doing it the old-fashioned way. So I'm going to share my little secret with you, and it's really pretty easy. On your fabric, you always have a fabric fold.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes, sure.
Okay. And the best yardage to work with this is a ½ yard to a yard. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to open your fabric up, and this is my fabric fold. I'm simply going to take my right corner up, my left corner up, bring my right corner down, and my left corner down, and I end up with this little triangle piece. Okay. So it's looking at me on my cutting board as a triangle. All I need to do is move it so it's looking as it's on a square. And by on a square, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off my corner, and then I'm going to choose my width of my bias. And as you can see, I've got one already cut here, and I'm just going to simply cut my strips. And because it's the way I've turned it, you can see I've got that stretch for perfect bias.
Okay. And that makes it just so much easier.
And then all I have to do is I have to piece it. And the other thing that it does is it gives you those sharp corners to line everything up for your stitching.
Thank your mother for that trick.
I did, trust me, because I do a lot of bias. I really thanked her. It was, yes, I thanked her a lot. And then I did something different with the fabric.
All right, let's look at that again. Let our audience
what
see
I
it.
did was, this was just a plain piece of silk. So I thought, well, how could I make it a little bit different? So what I did was I went to the art section or the paint section in a hobby store, and I bought the stencils that you see a lot that they use on the walls.
Yeah.
Then what I did was I found this great fabric paint, and I bought a simple brush from the home improvement store, and I placed my stencil on my fabric, and with my brush I just painted over, and I ended up with my own custom fabric.
Now you did the custom painting before you did your bias strips on top of that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Oh, Chris, these are just fascinating ideas. Now Chris has some more sewing inspirations for you. Chris, you are truly an artist. I'm going to let you just tell our audience. Oh, beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay.
On this piece, the center medallion that you see, I happened to be shopping with my family after Christmas, and it is actually a Christmas ornament that was 50% off. And I bought it with the intention of actually using it in some type of project. It wasn't something that I wanted to use on a Christmas tree. I wanted to use it in a Christmas project. The actual overall design happened to be an inspiration when I was driving home one night. I happened to peer through an open window of a neighbor, and they had one of those 50 metal clocks that had the clock was in the center, and it had the metal spikes sticking out. So that was kind of the inspiration for the rest of the design on the pillow. And then the fabric was the painting technique of just using a stencil and fabric technique.
Oh, there's more. There's more. Oh, May, look at this.
Oh, and this one was just, it's just a simple grid work design. And again, the fabric was painted. And what I did was I used the crystals to create the 4 points around, so it looked like a metal medallion around the center.
Beautiful. Show me some more.
On this one was a fun one. What I used was it's a thread that actually through heat smocks. It shrinks up about 30%. So it was a real easy way to do smocking. If anybody's done it with elastic thread, I suggest you buy this thread instead because it made a big difference. And I created the focal point. The center was, again, the painted fabric. And this is, again, Christmas, 50% off. It's actually garland. It's crystal garland. And I bought boxes and boxes of it, and I actually have it in my house in my bathroom. I've glued it up around like crown molding.
Wow. Oh, another wow.
And on this one, again, fabric was painted. And
this is velveteen.
Cotton velveteen, and then we used the bias technique with the zigzag. And these little metal medallions I bought, again, at a junk shop somewhere. I just happened to find them, and I stitched them on, and they're kind of, look like possibly tassels hanging from the top of the pillow.
Fabulous.
This one was just really simple. It's just that same grid work pattern, and I bought with the painting, and I bought these buttons from a button designer. I just fell in love with them because I like. They were just really pretty. I mean, they were metallic, and I tend to sometimes be drawn towards metallic. And I figured, where am I going to use them? And they actually worked out perfect in it because they kind of brought out this burnt color in the fabric.
Oh, and you have one more, Chris.
I have one more, yeah. And this one's just a really easy one to experiment with the fabric painting because it's just one simple design. And then again, the bias, and I use 3 strips to kind of help bridge the 3 different sections together.
Oh, and Chris, your color design, you just are such a wonderful designer.
Thank you. It's always fun. It's always fun.
And now Chris has a So Quick, So Easy project for you. Chris, that is the most adorable needle book.
Oh, thank you. It was actually a really easy project to do, and it's a great project for all those sewers that you have in your life, so to speak. And it's a great travel piece, too, if you happen to sew and travel. So let's go through the steps of creating it. The first thing you need to do is determine the size of the needle book, and there were 2 fabrics that I fell in love with that I happened to want to use. You could use 2, you could use 3, you could just use 1, but since I was using 3, I had to divide my fabric pieces up into 3s and make sure that when you do that, that you include a seam allowance so your piece doesn't actually end up a little bit shorter than what you intended. The next step is to piece those fabric pieces together, and I used a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You could use a wider seam allowance if you want, but make sure that you've included that in your plan. And then you just press the seams either to one side or you can press them open. I pressed mine to one side. The next step I did was, because we're going to be doing some decorative stitching down those seams to kind of hide them and add a little bit of interest, was I put a fusible backing on the back side of my piece, and I used just a tricot or a knit backing. And then what I did was I went and I decorated each of those seams, and I used what they call a rickrack stitch. It's like 3 zigzags on top of one another. Okay, the next step was free motion quilting, which is this project is a really fun way if you are a little skeptical or you want to practice your skills to do it, because it's small. Okay, it doesn't take a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of space to cover, so you can do it really quickly and get a feel for it. And the one trick I always do is I cut my batting on something this small a little bit bigger so that I can cut down to rather than try to stretch my batting. Now there are a couple ways that you can finish this. I actually did on this one, you can do a flip and turn, which is really easy, or you can do a bias edge, and that's what I actually did on my project. Was I did the bias. I just happen to like bias edges. I think it just makes it a lot cleaner looking. And the final step was our little flower decoration, and I actually found these flowers in the scrapbooking section of my hobby store, and they've got the little buttons on it. I adjusted my zigzag stitch to the correct width, and I just placed them on there and stitched them down, and my needlebook was done.
Oh, Chris, that is so adorable. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
And now I have some doll dressing ideas for you. You know how I love doll clothes. This little doll is named Martha. You might guess who she's named for. I have the privilege of having several dolls named for me. What I want you to look at is the folded tucks and the centerpiece, the Victorian embroidery, and then let's just look at the beauty of folded tucks. I'm telling you, whether it's on doll clothes or children's clothes or whatever, folded tucks are one of my favorite techniques in the whole world. Folded tucks are easy, but let's see first of all about making that little bodice. This is a Victorian edging, which as you can see has a seam allowance on both sides, but it's finished with the entredot on either side. So what I have to do, and through the magic of pre-preparation, I've already cut away that seam allowance, and I'll finish cutting away the seam allowance on this side. Now, the reason I'm showing you that right now, the center line that I draw on for this bodice, that will be the line for my Victorian embroidery to be sewn on after I do the tucks. Now these other lines are my tuck lines. I have drawn them on. I will finger press them, and then I will go and very carefully iron them, and I do one at a time, and I fold them up, and then using the presser foot guide, these over here I think were 1/2 inch tucks, but you can make them whatever width you want to. I come along and sew my tuck. Then after that tuck is sewn, come back, fold the next line, finger press it, really press it, and then once again, use whatever guide that whatever foot you have, or wherever you want to put your needle position, and sew in the tucks. And then, after the tucks are sewn in, after you can see I have both the seam allowances off, I'm going to go ahead and place my centerpiece. Here are my tucks, and then you see I'm fixing a square of fabric, and then after I'm getting ready to zigzag this down, I'm going to trace off the bodice. Of course, the seam allowance is in there, and before I cut the whole thing out, I will zigzag down the centerpiece, and then I will cut my bodice out. That's what you call creating heirloom fabric before you cut it out, and that's really the way we do most of our heirloom bodices. And now I have a wonderful section of hand embroidery for you. I'm very happy to have as my guest today my dear friend Beverley Sheldrick from New Zealand. Beverley has authored several books on needlework and is a regular contributor to So Beautiful magazine. Beverley, welcome to the show.
Martha, thank you so much for inviting to be here with you and with your viewers. Now, Martha, today what I want to talk to your viewers about is this fake feather stitch, and you'll see that it's in this section here. You can see it's this blue band that goes all the way around here. I'm also going to talk to you about a little bit about these rosebuds, because they're just a very dainty little rosebud, just a tad different from all the other ones that we happen to do. Now, I call this fake feather stitch, and it came about because I found that I had a lot of students who perhaps did not have an embroidery background, and to do good feather stitch they actually found it really quite difficult to do. Real feather stitch takes a bit of practice.
Yeah.
So this was a really easy way for the students to learn quickly how to get a good result without doing the hard stuff. Now, girls, the first secret is quite simply, you will see that I have got a row of machine stitching. So this is cheating.
Okay.
And I use just a normal regular 2.5 machine length, and I would, of course, normally I'd have it in a matching colour rather than a colour which is rather obvious here. And so that's the first clue. Now the second thing is I do it upside down. Now you know I come from down under, so of course I do everything upside down. But I do find it easier to work away from myself. So here we are. You will see that I have started on the side here. I've used the length of my stitch to give me the length of that first little bell there. Then you will see that I've gone to the second side and I've done the same thing again, and then you can see here how I've continued on down. Really, Martha, it makes life so much easier, because the only thing that I have to worry about is getting the width. I don't have to worry about the length of my little bell that I've got there. And of course, here we've got just a straight stitch. Then you will see I've got a fly stitch around it. But then I've gone back and I've angled my needle in such a way that I've put a kink in my stalk there, and I've got the little lazy daisy there. So here we are. You can see I've actually would normally do this with 2 strands of stranded cotton. I've got 6 in there to make it easy. You can see I've started there, I've gone over. So here I am on this side. I've already got that one tight there. I'm coming out. So I'm using once more the length to get my length, and so all I had to do was decide how wide I was going, and you can see here how I've just continued to go on down. I only have to decide the length, the width, and then up I come there at the length of that machine. You can see when you look at the garment what a pretty little even stitch I've got. But of course, if I was doing it myself, then I would be turning this round and I would be going like that. Much, much easier for people who don't have a lot of skills with embroidery. Now we're looking at this rosebud, and of course I want that to go like that, just like that. Take it over my finger, push it forward with your finger like that, and that will stop that ribbon from twisting. Of course, we all know how to do a fly stitch, don't we? If you don't, then you'll find it's in really any embroidery book. It's just such a common embroidery stitch. So there we are. You can see my tail there. Now, of course, you can see that my needle is in here. When I put my needle in, instead of leaving it like that, I'm now just going to angle that like that, so that when the needle comes through, you can see how I've got a kink in it, and then I'm just going to turn this round. I'm just going to do that little lazy daisy stitch like that. And of course, when you do it, don't forget to put a wee point on the end. And there you are. Isn't that sweet? Just makes such a difference by putting that little kink there, whether you put your wee leaf a little bit lower or whether you have it a wee bit higher like that. It's just so simple. And of course, it's done in 2 strands of stranded cotton.
Beverley, thank you so much. How wonderful to have all these little tricks.
Well, that's all it is, Martha. It makes life so much easier.
Oh, you do such beautiful work, Beverley. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I have a beautiful piece from my vintage collection to share with you. This dress is one of the most beautiful pieces in my collection, as well as being one of the most delicate. Now let me show you why. This beautiful Malene lace that has been, the 2 pieces at the neckline are joined with this beautiful bridging, and I honestly can tell you it's just 1 strand of thread. I'm not even sure what kind of thread it is, but it is so delicate. Then the whole front panel has these beautiful pieces of insertion joined with that beautiful bridging. The sleeve has more of the beautiful Malene laces joined with that beautiful, beautiful bridging. And tucks, we just talked about tucks. More tucks right here. Aren't they beautiful? These are folded tucks also, probably 1/8 inch folded tucks. Coming on down the skirt, which is absolutely fabulous with the lace and all the handwork, I want to get on down here to show you this ruffle. It is just beautiful. And by the way, there are more of the folded tucks that come down on either side. This is the center panel. This ruffle is really, really pretty, and it has more folded tucks on the bottom of the ruffle. 1, 2, 3, and then more of the bridging. Beautiful Malene lace, more of the bridging, Malene lace, and then there's a sweet, sweet little fabric ruffle. I absolutely love it. And then on the bottom. Thank you so much for joining me in my sewing room today. I would really like to invite you back next time.